Hi, I'm Femi OK and you're in the stream. Today, to say getting married in Israel is complicated, well, that's quite an understatement. We'll look at the strict rules faced by many in the country and what they're forced to do to tie the knot. Looking out for your live feedback, we have our digital producer Malika Bilal. I know you've done a lot of stream shows, so you know that when we look at Israel as a subject, a lot of our online community, they already have views not necessarily connected to the subject.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
How's today doing?
Well, when we talk about Israel, most people want to talk about politics.
Sure.
So what's interesting in this discussion is honing through the politics to talk about the personal, because this is a very personal discussion. So Garrett does that on Twitter. He says, at the end of the day, you should be able to be with who you love, regardless of race, religion, or orientation. Of course, we want to hear from all of you at home as well. Whether you share those views or have your own, tweet us with #AJStream.
Now, before we start the main discussion, be sure to check out our website. That's where I am right now. You can see some of the other stories that we're following. Also gives you on every story an opportunity to comment and give us your feedback on our exclusive web content. Now let's check out some of the other stories that we're keeping an eye on. The destruction of Israel's lineage. That's what some believe will happen if civil unions are allowed in the country. Now currently, if you want wedded bliss in Israel, you have to get married to someone of the same faith. And if you're Jewish, it's even more restricted because you're limited to a very few specific groups. This is forcing the thousands who don't meet the strict criteria to hop on a plane and tie the knot abroad. Now new bills introduced into Israeli parliament, they hope to legalize civil unions and give couples the same rights and privileges as those married in religious ceremonies. But the legislations have already been met with so much opposition that many are skeptical they even pass. So what impact would this have on Israel's society, and why is getting married so complicated? Joining us to help us talk about this via Skype from Tel Aviv, we have a member of Israeli Parliament, Ruth Calderon. She also authored one of the proposed bills calling for civil unions. In our Google Plus Hangout, David Gross is a religious teacher in Israel. Mickey Gitson is Executive Director of Be Free Israel. That's an organization that aims to promote freedom of religion in the country. And Leah Arahoni is an Orthodox activist and co-founder of Women for the War, which seeks to preserve the traditional sanctity of the Western Wall. So let's get the conversation started with Ruth. We talked about, in the introduction, how it's quite complicated getting married in Israel. How do you get married?
It's not that complicated, but there's only one way. Since Turkish law in Israel, both Muslims, Christians and Jews can only get married in a religious way. So each of them have to go to either the Rav or the Qadi or whatever church and get married there. The connection that was made in the beginning of the state is that once someone is married in a religious way, he is listed as a couple in Israel. Our problem is that there is not another way, there is no other way to be listed as a couple if you do not want or can't, as you mentioned. Either you cannot or you don't want to get married through the rabbinate in the official rabbinic religious way. So what I am offering, what we are offering at Yesh Atid, is that there will be two different ways, one religious and one simply official, like City Hall. That people that want to be connected as couples can have the ceremony, not a religious ceremony, just an official, contract between them.
Right.
And have all the rights like anyone else that is a couple that got married through religion.
All right,
We're
so-
offering two different lines.
Okay, so Ruth, let me just take a pause for a moment. Let me just go to David. So I just want to make sure that I understood how Ruth explained it, because she's trying to offer a different way in the Israeli parliament, and we'll see how that works out in just a moment. So if I wasn't Jewish and I lived in Israel, how would I get married?
Well, it depends on how you're registered, which religion you're registered as. If you're a Christian, you apply to the relevant authorities. If you're a Muslim, you apply to the relevant authorities. And if you're, that's how there are holes in the system. It's true, but at the same time, there's a very important point. The overarching idea at the stake here is that the unity of the Jewish people. And the minute that we start to have parallel systems, it's unfortunately the beginning of the end, and it creates very, very complicated and potentially very tragic situations, which all too often occur anyway. And if we go down the route the member of Knesset suggests, it's just going to create more of the same.
All right, so we've got one system, so very simple right now. And just Leah, let me just double check with you. So if a Jewish person wanted to marry a Christian person in Israel, what would they have to do?
A Jewish person cannot marry a Christian person in Israel. They can go abroad, get married abroad, and come back and get registered with the Ministry of the Interior as a married couple.
Okay. All right. Malika, I think I've got the grips with how complex it is. Ruth says it's very simple. There's one size fits all, which is basically orthodox, or you have to leave the country.
Right, and I think David had a comment that was most pertinent. He says it's complicated. Now, there's a tweet here from Max. He says the issue goes back to compromises that Israel's founders made to overcome the secular religious divide and to ensure national unity. So, Mickey, I think that begs the question that many people online actually are asking, is whether or not these compromises that were once made still apply in today's society.
The compromises we're talking about are not ideological compromises, for sure. Those are pure political compromises that the founders of the State of Israel had to do back in the days in order to allow the establishment of the State of Israel. It was quite clear back then, even, and if you go through papers of David Ben-Gurion, the founder of the State of Israel, and others, they were talking about Jewish nationality being reviving here in the State of Israel, but at the same time pluralistic, even secular perspective over what is to be Jewish. I think that one of the major points that has to be talked about, the majority of Jews around the world, and now I'm talking about Jews, are not Orthodox Jews. They belong either to the Reform movement, the conservative movement, see themselves outside of the movements around the world, and those have no way to get married in Israel. It's not that we're only talking about a religious Jewish ceremony. We're talking about that there are groups of Jews in Israel who are not eligible to marry anyone. The ridiculous situation today in Israel is the only democracy in the world that the Reform rabbi cannot conduct a ceremony, a religious ceremony, is in Israel.
Right.
So this situation has to be changed in order to actually to enforce unity within the Jewish people. Because today there is a very small, actually getting smaller, stream that controls and monopolizes its opinion on the legal system of Israel, and this is unheard of.
So
well, actually 80% of Israelis support religious marriage, and
you're of course wrong, because numbers show 72%.
When you spoke, I didn't interrupt you. Please give me the same courtesy, okay? 80% of Israelis in 2009 said that religious marriage is either important or very important. Reform Jews do not live in Israel for the most part. There may be 30 Reform synagogues in the whole country.
Oh, man.
And so
Leah, there's always a dangerous statistic. There's always a dangerous statistics, because there's also I've got a poll here from Hidrush, which is promoting religious freedom and equality in Israel, and their poll says that 2/3 of Israelis support civil marriage. So I think we have to be careful with the statistics, because who knows?
Well, first of all, it really depends what's the question that you ask.
Right.
80% of Israelis think that religious marriage is important or very important, and I think the issue of civil union really applies to two communities. It's either the gay community or the non-Jewish community of about 500,000 Russian immigrants who came here and they identify with the Jewish nature of the country, but they're not Jewish by religion.
I'm sorry,
Can I please
we're
jump
just talking to a member of Knesset, Ruth Calderon, who is definitely a Jew. She is actually what we call in Hebrew Talmidah Chachama. She was studying Judaism for her entire life. She cares about her life as a Jew, I assume, and she still chose not to marry through to the rabbinate. It means there is a huge group, and around me I can show it. Most of my friends who are Jewish, see themselves as Jews, care of being Jewish. This is the reason they act on this issue.
Ruth?
Don't want to
Can I
get
please jump in
ready.
and explain myself? Thank you very much for giving me such credit. I feel, first of all, that Americans can understand, and all of us too, that overseas, anywhere but Israel, a person gets married in church or synagogue or mosque. And is listed in the city hall. And there's no problem for Jews all over the world that people can be listed in city hall, registered by the state, and then go back to either a conservative, reform, reconstructionist, or Orthodox or ultra-Orthodox synagogue and have the ceremony that they feel comfortable in. The same thing that is happening all over the world, we want to be able to do at home. For me, the reason, as was said before, that we did not go to the rabbinate is because I did not want the very important day of my life of getting married. I did not want to lie. I didn't want to. There are things that you have to say and read when you do it in an Orthodox way that are not true in my life. I didn't want to lie there. And the other thing is that I wanted an egalitarian ceremony. The man, I don't know how to say, makes his wife his own, and I wanted myself to do the same thing to my husband, and that is not possible anywhere in Orthodox world. So because I cherish my Jewishness and because I learn a lot and I love it, I wanted to do it in a meaningful way. And Orthodoxy did not offer me a meaningful way. So some of the people, as was said by Leah, are people that are not non-Jews or not considered Jews, and that's why they need this option. The gay community is another community that need it, but most of the Jews in Israel are not Orthodox. Most of the Jews in the world are not Orthodox. And all of us cannot get married in a way that is meaningful to us, right, because the only legitimate way, as was said, is the Orthodox way.
Okay, I just want to show, David, hold on one moment. I just want to show our audience something, and then I'm going to come straight back to you. This is a freedom of marriage around the world map. So we look at the map, and the legend is if it's dark, it's severe restrictions for marriage. If it's grey, then there are some restrictions, and if it's white, there are no restrictions. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit closer so we can see where we are in Israel. And we go to Israel, and it's some of the most restrictive marriage rules and regulations in the whole of the world. David, why is this? Our audience are watching outside of Israel and they're not getting, why are you so strict?
That I will put it, I want to sort of answer to the member of Knesset Calderon's word before.
Sure.
There are the Jews had been in exile for 2,000 years, and for many years that meant that there were very many shared practices, shared ideas, shared rituals. And as the 19th century came along, and there was the Enlightenment, and there was a lot more assimilation, there was a lot more democracy flowered across emancipation across Western Europe, and the definitions have all at once condensed and expanded.
So
and now, 200 years later, there are very few shared ideas and shared practices that have kept the Jewish nation together, and this is one of them. And as I was actually saying to a friend of mine who was visiting recently, I want my children, any children that I might have, to be able to marry any other Jewish person's children. And that's the bottom line. That's the unity that in any other country is yes, you can say it's enforced. You can say it's a monopoly, even though a monopoly is an economic term and not anything else. We're talking about one of the very few things that keep the Jewish people together. There are many problems, very many divisions in this country, and we're trying to do our best to bridge them. But the unfortunate reality is if you're going to take this parallel track, and the member of Knesset Calderon knows, and Mickey knows, and Lea knows that you start this journey, it's going to create lots of technical. Again, for one example, if a Jewish people have to undergo a religious divorce ceremony.
But you have to, David, you have to understand. You talk from within your community, and it's a problem. Let me also put a sentence, because what's going on within my community, the larger Israeli secular community, more and more people leaving the country to go get married abroad. Every 8th couple, according to statistics,
and that's very unfortunate.
No, just a second. And moreover, my friends who underwent marriage through the rabbinical institutions want to have less and less connection to any Jewish life, because the experience they had with when they met these rabbinical institutions is a negative one. As Ruth Calderon just said, when they met the rabbinate, no, it's not only about them not being nice, but because we're coming also from a very strong ideological Jewish perspective. I'm a Jew. It's important for me to be a Jew, but my Jewish perspective is different than yours. Please respect mine as I do respect yours. I think that Judaism, and if you read through history, was never in one line. There were always, when you talk about Jewish history, different angles that people read the text, treated it. All the idea of Judaism is about the debate within it. And I think that we should cherish and respect the differences between us.
All of us that might clarify this a little bit. Some of us talk about Judaism as a religion, and of course I respect that. And some of us speak about Judaism as a culture. Now, for me, Judaism is a culture. Within the culture, there's also a religion. But because I am not a halachic person, for me, Judaism is culture. And I believe I would defer to what David said. I think many things are connecting us. The language and the text and the calendar and the holidays and the food and the families. So today, even today, many of the communities do not marry each other. But I believe in Jewish culture that will long live, even if some people will have the right, as was said before.
So Ruth, take a breath. Guests, take a breath. Take a moment, because I want to bring the community into this conversation. All right, so I hear you. I apologize for stepping over you, but this conversation has 5 people in it. The 5th person is the community. Malika.
Well, they're listening to what everyone is saying, and I think a lot of it is resonating with them. Now, you asked Femi earlier, why so strict? One of our community members has the same question. I'm going to play this video comment here.
Israel is ranked as one of the worst countries in marriage freedoms. I'm not surprised. I'm not shocked either, because this is the common practice in the MENA region, except that Judaism is not prioritized, and so no interfaith marriages would happen. The thing is, Israel loves itself as democratic and free with a free and democratic constitution, so this shouldn't happen actually, and it's despicable and should be frowned upon, which in Israel as anywhere else in the world.
So Leah, he mentions, of course, that it's despicable. He says it should be frowned upon. But I want to pull up, in addition to that, this Google Plus comment, because it picks up on something that you said a little bit earlier about solutions. People can go outside of the country to get married. So on Google Plus, Jan says, if a rabbi in Israel doesn't want to marry a couple of mixed religions, he should be allowed to say no. The couple will just have to find someone else who will do it. So should that be the answer, going outside of Israel to get married?
Well, you see, I think that the law, the state of Israel, the whole idea of the state of Israel is to be a haven. It's one of the ideas for the Jewish people. With 70% intermarriage in the diaspora, if we want to have a chance at having a Jewish continuity and a Jewish nation in the next generation, the only way to preserve that is to make sure that there will be no intermarriage, or to keep it at as low as possible. I really respect the individual experiences of every person, including Ms. Calderon and Mickey. We have to look, we can either look at the situation from the perspective of individual rights or from the perspective of the greater good of the community. And at some point, these two have to meet and be negotiated, and we have to find a solution that will work for the greatest good of the community, and that is preserving a strong family unit and making sure that there is a Jewish nation in the next generation. The only way to do that is to prevent intermarriage, and that will not happen with civil unions.
So Leah, I'm looking at my laptop right now, and there's a Facebook site that offers a way for you to get married if you don't fit the criteria in Israel. So Cyprus is very popular, I have to say, for places for couples to get married, and nice wedding pictures popping up here. There's also a whole wedding cruise business that goes on. If you fell into any of these categories, Leah, how would you feel about leaving your own country to have to get married?
I understand that it is inconvenient, and like I said, I see the problem of the individual. The question is, will we sacrifice the community of the benefit and the need of the entire Jewish people for the need of a small group of the Israeli citizens? Because, like I said, 80% of Israelis feel that having a religious marriage is extremely important.
I'm sorry that I have to jump in, and it's really, Leah, I'm sorry to tell you for the first time probably, but you are not the one keeping the Jewish people alive. I'm as Jewish as you are. I care about Jewish tradition as much as you are. My perspective of Judaism should be respected by you as much as your Jewish perspective is respected by me. I'm sorry, you have to understand that you live among people who think differently than you, but have a major belief in this idea and notion of Israel as a Jewish state. It goes hand in the hand with the idea of freedom of religion and freedom of religion. When your perspective will be controlling this country, myself and the majority of Israelis, and I'm sorry again, the numbers that you...
That's not true. You know, I wasn't born religious. I have many religious, non-religious neighbors.
But you chose your way.
I did.
And I'm choosing a different one, and I'm representing a big group of Israelis who live here. By the way,
but not the majority. The majority of Israelis they're not Orthodox, they're traditional.
Let's check the last elections. Last elections in the Knesset. The majority, and if you count the members of Knesset, even, I'm not sure the political situation will allow it eventually, but the majority of Israelis clearly speak about the need for a solution. Definitely, when you talk about people who want and feel and part of this society, you know, one of my best friend, she served in the army. She's part of this society, and she's an immigrant from the United States that got converted by an Orthodox rabbi.
Okay, so Mickey, take a breath, because we're right at the end of the show. We've got 1 minute to go, so I'm going to ask our guests very quickly to get a sense of, do they feel that any legislation for civil marriage or civil union, is that going to pass anytime soon? David?
I don't think so.
Leah?
I'd be very surprised.
I don't think so either.
Leah? Mickey? Yeah, I mean, you put the case for it, but do you think it really will?
I don't think. I work hard for the legislation to pass, and this is what I know I'm doing.
Right, and Ruth, I mean, you authored
I'm the only optimistic here.
Okay.
I know.
Why
I was optimistic. I said I'm working hard for it to work.
No, I'm optimistic. First of all, because there are almost no intermarriage in Israel. We do not, unfortunately. We are not in such relationship with the Arabs in Israel that we get married with them.
All right.
And so that is not a problem at all. And I think it is just right to give
again, I've got 30 seconds left.
I could marry in the Rabbanut. I chose not to. I think the Rabbanut will win.
All right.
And the same thing happens all over the Middle East now.
You're listening to Ruth Calderon. She's an MP in the Knesset. You're going to hear much more from her in the post show. I know I spoke over an MP. I'm going to be in trouble, but I know she'll forgive me as we go to the post show at stream.aljazeera.com. So on the next show, what will we be doing? Well, we will be hosting the stream without Malika Bilal, who is off on vacation, but not yet. I'm going to make you work for another 15 minutes before you can pack your bags.
I can do it.
All right. And if you've got to tweet for her, now is the time to tweet her at AJStream. And that's where we'll see you at the post show, stream.aljazeera.com. Thanks so much for watching. To be continued. Hello again, this is the Stream's online post show. I made Ruth stop talking because I had to take her across to the post show, but we were in mid-discussion. What we are discussing, the strict rules of marriage in Israel and how new bills introduced into Parliament are trying to give everybody equal privileges and equal rights. So with us to talk about this, Ruth Calderon, she's the MP of the Israeli Parliament. David Gross is the religious teacher in Israel. Mickey Gitson is Executive Director for Be Free Israel, and Leah Eharoni is a co-founder of Women for the War. I am going to start with an ad. It's from the Be Free Israel campaign. Mickey, you're part of that. I'm going to start with the ad, and the ad is choose your way to get married. Is there anything you want to tell the audience before I play it to them? Mickey?
I think that we showed something very beautiful about the Israeli society and the diversity of it, and I think this diversity should be legitimate by legislation in Israel, and I think this is actually the face that Israel wants to show outside to the outside of the world.
All right, so I'm going to play that, bearing in mind this is part of Mickey's campaign. Have a look at this. So, David, that ad, I'm sure you've seen it. It's a box with married couples and they're all trying to get out of the box, but there's only one way that they can get married in Israel. You're very adamant, but there's a really good reason for this. Is there any fear, do you think connected to this, the fear that maybe Judaism, Jewishness will get watered down? Is that what I'm hearing?
It's less than that, but I just want to make the point, Mickey, and to Chaver Knesset Calderon, if you want to have a go at reforming the Rabbanut, I'm with you all the way. The Rabbanut has more problems. It's not, it's got serious amounts of. I don't want to, be in trouble, but we all know what we're talking about. There are serious.
I don't know what you're talking about, David. Help me out. School me.
Let's just imagine. Imagine the 1980s, serious amounts of bureaucracy, 1970s, sorry, in the UK.
Right.
Serious amounts of bureaucracy, really no personal touch whatsoever. It's for the bureaucracy, by the bureaucracy, for the benefit of the bureaucracy. I have no problem with that. You want to have a go? I have better stories than anybody else here. For other reasons. Someone wants to have a go at reforming the Rabbanut, I'm with you all the way.
I think once there is another option, the Rabbanut will reform itself.
That's true, but moreover, David, it's not about us wanting to reform the Rabbanut only. I'm not giving up my angle in the Jewish story. This is something very important. I'm not trying to make it easier for me to be Jewish. I have a full Jewish perspective that I want ownership on the Jewish life in Israel. I want to be part of it. I want to discuss with you this issue. When you say there is only one way and you can work around it, there is a problem.
I never said there's one way. I said there is one process of getting married in Judaism. But this is according to your perspective, and I respect it, and I respect your perspective, and I would never ask you to get. I would never
respect what you're saying, Mickey, and I hate to interrupt you, but I have to get this tweet in from someone who is basically saying exactly what you're saying, that this isn't a question of religion, it's a question of stifling individual freedom and choice. And now, of course, before that, we were talking about reforming the rabbinate. So, Ruth, I want to go to you with this next tweet. Pierre online says, there are two problems. This is being seen as a new attack against the monopoly of the rabbinate, and it's also a question about the Jewish identity of the state, he goes on to say. So, of course, you're introducing this legislation, Ruth. Is it being seen as an attack on the Jewish nature of Israel and also an attack on the rabbinate?
I hope not, because I'm coming in, all four of us, as I'm hearing it, are all coming from caring very much and loving very much the tradition, but we have differences in how to go forward in keeping the tradition alive. Another legislation that I put on the table was Israel as a democratic and Jewish state. I believe that we can be at the same time Jewish and democratic. And I care, together with my fellows here, that there will be continuity of the Jewish people, that Judaism will thrive. But as I see it, and from the Talmud that I learned, there were many different ways of getting married in different communities. When I learned the Talmud, it's not exactly what we do today. So Judaism, like any other religion, is always evolving. And I just want to say that where I come from is from a place that cherishes and wants to keep continuity of Judaism. I'm sorry that today already, because the rabbinate is so stiff, many Jews are turning away from it, and I'm afraid that we are losing them, the unaffiliated. I believe that we can work together here and let people have a civil way. It's a union, it's not a marriage. A civil union, to be couples, to have a meaningful ceremony of being a couple and having all the rights, even if they are gay, or even if they want to marry someone that is not a Jew. I would not marry them. I believe that you should marry your same tradition or culture, because the children need to know who they are.
Okay.
But if people need to do that, they should have the rights as a couple.
All right, so guess I'm learning so much in this conversation. Leah, I'm going to ask you something, because I want our audience to understand this as well. As I was preparing for this show, I learned something about the mikvah, which is a ritual bathing for the bride-to-be. I know you got married in the traditional way. Would you mind very quickly explaining what that is?
You asking me?
Yes, yes.
Oh, sorry,
yeah.
I didn't hear you.
Yes.
Yeah. A mikveh is a ritual bath. It's basically a pool that a woman goes in, or men also go to the mikveh, that she immerses in, and that's something she does every month after her menses.
Okay, so this is part of the traditional way of getting married in Israel.
That's right.
And it's getting some pushback. There was a Channel 10 documentary that was an undercover documentary which followed some bride-to-bes who were doing the traditional Orthodox way of getting married. I'm going to show some of our audience what this particular bride-to-be did. You will hear some water noise. She's literally in the shower, and she's also being inspected. So have a look at this. Bride-to-be being inspected for the members of our guests who can't see it, the guests who can't see it. She's being asked, are you filing underneath your nails? Did you brush your teeth, your ears, your nose? Have you cleaned your nose? So this is a very full-on inspection, and this is part of the mikveh. Leah, if this is part of your tradition, I can understand why it would be embraced. If you just want to get married, this could be seen as very invasive.
Like
Do you
David
understand
said,
that?
Yes, I understand that. And like David said, we all agree here that the current rabbinate has to go through a restructuring in a way that will be much more friendly and open, and it's really a service organization for the entire Jewish people.
And how will that help? Will that mean that brides-to-be won't have to be inspected and strip off and do what they have to do right now if they marry in an Orthodox way?
It's two different issues. The mikveh is one issue, and you don't have to go to the mikveh to be married in a Jewish way, in an Orthodox way. It's two different issues that are not connected. They are connected by law and by regulation now,
sure,
but they don't necessarily have to be connected. And going back to what Mrs. Calderon said, we all care about preserving this country and preserving the fabric of this country. Israel is a very diverse society, and for all of us to get along, as Mickey also said, our founding fathers found a status quo that we can all live with one way or the other. We don't all love it. It's not perfect for any one of us, but somehow it allows all of us, with our diversity, to preserve our culture, preserve the fabric of society. If we keep chipping away at the status quo and changing it every few years, we're going to get to a place where we will not be able to live together. And this is one of the many steps towards that direction. I think it's unfortunate.
Let me just bring in Mickey.
To love Judaism and not love the Jews. You know, the Jews cannot live with this status quo anymore. We have to listen to them.
But you know, Mrs. Calderon, I respect your views, and I would ask you to respect mine. We have to get together, and the way to do it is through negotiation. It's not the legislation.
Views, and I just can't be honest. I believe, you know, Judaism is who I am, and I cannot lie when I do such an important ceremony or any other ceremony. So I do respect you, of course, but the status quo is not working anymore.
But
and we need to look at each other and negotiate and understand each other where you come from, and I believe that I do understand, but we must find a new way to level and to live together.
Even more so, we can keep talking about status quo, but let's check reality in Israel. There is no status quo. It's not the reality. From one hand, more shops and stores are open on Shabbat against the status quo. From the other end, you have segregation on buses that is against the status quo. Really doesn't exist in Israel.
That's not status quo. Segregation of buses is not a status quo, and
it's part. The status quo touches four points. 4 points. None of them actually still stands in the same way that it was when the state of Israel was established. Things change, society changed.
Yeah, they do.
Relations change between groups in Israel. If you want the status quo to be relevant, you need to rethink the status quo. Really talk with people who live here and really care about it for it to be relevant to my life. Otherwise, I would just won't cooperate with you because.
So Leah and Mickey, you're never going to agree, but this is what's going to happen. Our audience have been watching for 40 minutes, and they always love some kind of conclusion, a sense of, well, what are you going to do next? So Leah, if you're on one end, one spectrum, and Mickey, you're on the other, what happens next for you in Israel? Leah, you're already married. Mickey, you're single. What happens next if there's this debate about how people in Israel get married and it's not resolved? What next?
Well, you know, they say about Jews, 2 Jews have 3 opinions, so this is nothing new for us. But, you know, Mickey's problem is really not with me. The Israeli society may not be all observant, but it's deeply, deeply traditional. 80% of Israelis are deeply traditional. They consign to the traditional view of marriage, and things are going to stay this way, I believe, at least in the perceivable future. Plus, the religious segment of the community is growing, of the country is growing steadily, and I think actually that's one of the reasons why Mrs. Calderon and her party are trying to change the status quo before it's too late for the secularists who do not subscribe to the traditional views.
So Ruth, we're just wrapping up.
I would like to suggest another way. Our party, Yesh Atid, is a party where we sit together, religious and secular and non-religious and traditional, and Israelis from all different places. And I believe the dispute like we had today can bring up a new solution that is better. When I listen to someone else that comes from a different place and he listens to me, I hope there was some kind of movement or dynamic in the way that Leah was listening to us and we to them. When Yesh Atid is working together with Beit Yehudi, which is an Orthodox party, we might come up with a new updated status quo that will be good for today and tomorrow.
Okay, so Ruth Calderon, you did get the last word eventually. Thank you for your patience. Mickey Griffithson, it was great to have you part of this conversation. Leah Aharoney, really appreciated your perspective, and David Gross as well. Really interesting to spend 40 minutes with all of you. Thank you very much for sharing your opinions. The community. Where are they?
Well, after 40 minutes, I can't say that we changed any minds, and I can't also leave us with an optimistic tweet, but there is this interesting perspective, shall we say, from Pat on Google+, who says, faiths of the world might like to own marriage as a means of controlling people, but the sooner that exclusive power is pried from their hands, the better.
She is Malika Bilal. She is off on vacation in the next 30 seconds. But thank you very much for being part of the show, the online community. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back on AJ Stream next Monday. See you then. Until then, it'll be online. Thanks for watching.